This is the original story of Sleeping Beauty called Briar by the brothers Grimm.
A king and a queen couldn't have children, and they wanted very much to have one. Then one day, while the queen was bathing, a crab crawled out of the water, came on shore and said, "Your wish will soon be filled, and you will give birth to a daughter." Indeed, this is what happened, and the king was so delighted by the birth of a princess that he organised a great feast and also invited the fairies who were living in his realm. Since he only had 12 golden plates, however, there was one fairy who had to be excluded, for there were 13 in all. The fairies came to the feast, and at the end of the celebration they gave the child some gifts. One gave virtue, the second beauty, and the others gave every splendid thing that one could possibly wish for in the world. But just after the 11th fairy had announced her gift, the 13th appeared, and she was quite angry that she had not been invited to the festivities. "Since you didn't ask me to attend this celebration," she cried out, "I say to you that when your daughter turns 15, she will prick herself with a spindle and fall down dead." The parents were horrified, but the 12th fairy hadn't made her wish yet, and she said, "The girl will not die. She will fall into a deep sleep for 100 years. The king still hoped to save his dear child and issued an order that all spindles in his entire kingdom were to be banned. Meanwhile, the girl grew up and became marvellously beautiful. On the day she turned 15, the king and queen had gone out, and she was left completely alone in the palace. So she wandered all over the place, just as she pleased, and eventually came to an old tower, where she found a narrow staircase. Since she was curious, she climbed the stairs and came to a small door with a yellow key stuck in the lock. When she turned it, the door sprang open, and she found herself in a little room where she saw an old woman spinning flax. She took a great liking to the old woman and joked with her and said that she wanted to try spinning one time. So she took the spindle from the old woman's hand. And no sooner did she touch the spindle than she pricked herself and fell down into a deep sleep. Just at that moment, the king returned to the palace with his entire courtly retinue, and everybody and everything began to fall asleep. The horses in the stable, the pigeons on the roof, the dogs in the courtyard and the flies on the wall. Even the fire flickering in the hearth became quiet and fell asleep. The roast stopped sizzling, and the cook, who was just about to pull the kitchen boy's hair, let him go, and the maid, who was plucking the feathers of a hen, let it drop and fell asleep. And a hedge of thorns sprouted around the entire castle and grew higher and higher until it was impossible to see the castle any more. There were princes who heard about this beautiful Briar rose, and they came and wanted to rescue her, but they couldn't penetrate the hedge. It was as though the thorns clung tightly together like hands, and the princes got stuck in there and died miserable deaths. All of this continued for many, many years, until one day a prince came riding through the country, and an old man told him that people believed that a castle was standing behind the hedge of thorns, and that a gorgeous princess was sleeping inside with her entire royal household. His grandfather had told him that many princes had come and wanted to penetrate the hedge. However, they got stuck hanging in the thorns and had died. "That doesn't scare me," said the prince. "I'm going to make my way through the hedge and rescue the beautiful princess." So off he went, and when he came to the hedge of thorns, there was nothing but flowers that separated and made a path for him. And as he went through them, the flowers turned back to thorns. After he reached the castle, the horses were lying asleep in the courtyard, and there was an assortment of hunting dogs. The pigeons were perched on the roof and had tucked their heads beneath their wings. When he entered the palace, the flies were sleeping, as was the fire in the kitchen, along with the cook and the maid. The prince continued walking, and he saw the entire royal household with the king and queen lying asleep. Everything was so quiet that he could hear himself breathe. Finally, he came to the old tower where Briar Rose was lying asleep. The prince was so astounded by her beauty that he leaned over and kissed her. Immediately after the kiss, she woke, and the king and queen and the entire royal household, and all the horses and the dogs and the pigeons on the roof and the flies on the walls, and the fire woke up. Indeed, the fire flared up and cooked the meat until it began to sizzle again, and the cook gave the kitchen's boy a box on the ear while the maid finished plucking the chicken. Then the wedding of the prince with Briar Rose was celebrated in great splendour, and they lived happily ever after until the end of their days.